I've spent the last 5 weeks putting together the most ultimate camera guide for the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Settings, modes, demonstrations, and rules of photography, all brought to you by Europe. Let's go. I decided to take my family over to Europe, and whilst I was there, I wanted to put together a comprehensive guide on the best way you can take photos and videos using these 4 things here on the back of the S24 Ultra. The thing is, it's not going to be like each individual mode and how to use them. I've done that already. It's going to be sort of tips, things you can do, ways to use the cameras that are on there to get the most out of it. Let's start with the settings that you should have turned on so you can take and frame your photos the best way. First one is shot suggestions. Absolutely turn this on. This will kind of be your guide in framing and composing your photo. It's in the settings, flick it on. You'll see the little best shot logo come up and you can just sort of navigate your way to it. Very simple. Next one is scene optimizer under the intelligent options menu. A lot of people tell you to turn this off. Don't listen to them. Scene optimizer is absolutely a great tool using Samsung's AI on the camera to identify the scene you're taking a shot of and then optimize the camera and the HDR and the white balance and everything like that to give you the most picturesque, aesthetically pleasing photo possible. And then grid lines. Now, I know I said that Samsung tell you or guide you for composition, but sometimes your own eye knows better. So go in the settings and turn grid lines on. This has a couple of other benefits too when it comes to video, in that it adds in the leveler to keep the horizon line, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Definitely turn it on and we'll talk about why it's important very soon. And by very soon, I mean right now. Grid lines are incredibly important because they help you with the rule of thirds when it comes to photography. The rule of thirds is kind of like a guide to help you position things inside your photo. So in a standard 4x3, you'll see on the screen that's broken up into 9 grids, 3, 3, and 3. And there's lines that sort of intersect all of the grids. The whole idea is you want to use those lines and those grids to position things in the frame to give you the most aesthetically sort of framing possible. For example, I wanted to take this photo of the London Eye, and I noticed that there was sort of some nice framing that could take place, particularly if I zoomed in. What I really wanted to do is using the sort of the corners of the middle grid, I wanted to try and position the London Eye inside of it to help me sort of get this nice aesthetic where there's like one sort of blank space and then 2/3 of the photo have been taken up by the London Eye. Same sort of thing with this building. I found that the building was quite aesthetically pleasing. So I wanted to position that in 2/3 and then have the sort of blank space or negative space outside it to create this nice visual aesthetic. And that's the thing, right? You sort of line it up and you use the grid lines to help you sort of position things and use the sort of points in the grid as well to help you sort of put things of importance, things that you want the eye to be drawn to from the person that you're showing the photo to. For example, this photo of from taken sort of upwardly, you can see that it's sort of got things positioned in the corners and it's a very nice sort of visually aesthetic photo. And again, I just used the grid lines to line it up. Very simple to do. It's also really good for videos where you can actually keep things center of frame because the grid lines are there for videos too. So if you're at a concert and you're zooming in really far away, you can keep something center of the grid. So that way you can get everything sort of evenly balanced and everyone's eyes are going to be drawn to the center and it creates a really nice visual. Definitely turn that on. And that's how the rule of thirds and sort of photography kind of lines up because it's sort of about placing things and positioning them in the right areas to give you the best visual aesthetic outcome later. Part of the grid lines is also framing your subject. And the thing with framing is it's all about using what you've got around you. You can, of course, create artificial frames and that might be fun, might be something you want to do. But using nature and using the things that you've got to sort of create a bit of a frame of what you're taking a photo of, again, can really highlight and accentuate what you're taking a photo of. So for example, at St. James Park, not the football stadium, like the actual park in London, I saw a tree arch that was framing some of the animals and the wildlife. And I used that to frame them and sort of, again, position them in the grid and position them around the frame to get a really nice aesthetic, a really nice visual aesthetic. There's other ways you can do it too. Like if you're at a hotel, you can use the window of your hotel room to frame the view that you've got. And it creates, again, this kind of nice little leading way of what you want people to look at, but it also gives them something else to kind of draw their eye sort of to where you want them to. A couple of examples that I'll be putting up as I'm sort of speaking, but it's really cool and creates this nice effect for the person looking at your photo. And the grid lines are kind of a part of that. They help you position that framing. Next, we're kind of changing tact a little bit, and it's more about how you can take advantage of the hardware on the S24 Ultra. The others were more kind of software related and like basic photography tips. This is definitely something that relates to the hardware of the phone, and that's depth perception. And it's not going to be about portrait photography. I'll get to that a little bit later. It's actually about how you can use the flexible zoom range to create a better dramatic depth effect or more sense of drama for things that are in the background. The thing is, if you use the 1x camera and get up close to something, it doesn't quite create the scale that you're looking for. Because whilst you might have the front or the foreground sort of in focus and you can see it, the backgrounds, there's a lot going on. You're not really isolating the part of the background that you want. You're better off taking a few steps back, switching to the 5x camera, and then going in on the same sort of part of the thing you were taking the photo of, and you'll see the background immediately becomes a lot more dramatic, a lot bigger, and it's a lot more probably normal to what your eye can see. Matches it a little bit better. The photos here of the outdoor gym in the resort I just stayed in are a good example of how you can bring the background closer just by moving back and using a different camera. But you can also see in examples of, in Catania, you could see Mount Etna. And from my hotel balcony, yeah, you can take a photo of everything, but the mountain kind of seems small off in the distance. So again, using that 5x or even 10 times, you can create that scale and you can actually show how big that thing was in relation to sort of where you are. And again, in Palermo, similar thing. I was on this really long street with all this beautiful street food and this mountain just plonked in the middle there. And again, using the ultra wide or the 1x, you don't get that sense of scale on how big that mountain is. But using the 5x or even 10x zoom, you can get closer to that, still capture that foreground, but create the scale and show the drama of what it actually is. Definitely takes advantage of what's going on in the back here.
Who is it? It's just the internet, mate. Just checking to see what you're looking at and where you are. Sorry, mate. I'm in Europe. Now that I'm back home, I got used to certain things when I was traveling Europe. Short of going back there, just so my phone actually thinks I'm still there, I've been using Surfshark to travel virtually to my desired destination. Surfshark VPN gives you the ease and simplicity of changing your location and going somewhere where you want to be. This could be for security purposes, or for my purpose, I got used to the content and the information I was getting whilst I was in Europe. Especially in the UK, the culture for football is amazing. And I got used to the commentary and the regularity of content that got uploaded to social media platforms that aren't made available here. Surfshark can take you back there from the comfort of your couch so that you don't miss the action that you got used to. The UI makes it so easy to select the country that you want, and it even guides you to the fastest location within that country itself. Something that's really neat too is it has an inbuilt kill switch that if you rely heavily on this VPN being connected, as soon as the VPN drops, it will kill your access to the internet altogether. This is great, especially if you're handling or inputting sensitive information whilst you're surfing the internet. Surfshark is the best way to take you from where you are to where you want to be. If you want to enjoy content from around the world safely from your couch, Surfshark have a very special offer for you. You can redeem your free Surfshark account by the link on the screen and in the description below, and use the code TWB to give yourself 4 months of exclusive extra access. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video.
Part of that sort of, I guess, perception is actually changing the perspective and the angle that you're taking the photo of. Most people's instinct, if you see like a landscape or a building, is to just take the photo where you're standing. Double tap, launch the camera, point at the building and snap it. But that doesn't really capture the imagination. It's not interesting to look at. It's just a building. What you can do is change the angle, change the perception, and again, use the flexibility of the cameras to your advantage. Flip the camera upside down and take advantage of the larger main sensor to create that sort of roll-on bokeh effect with the foreground focus and then it softly rolls out of focus. Or the ultra-wide camera having macro capabilities. You can actually get pretty much everything in detail in the foreground, and again, still get that nice sort of rolling blur in the background. That creates a bit more drama, makes the photo a bit more interesting and a bit more memorable. With that too, you can change the focus area. So you can tap on the screen and you can change it from the background to the foreground, foreground to background, for example. And that way, again, you get to be the decider of what you want the person to look at, because you can dictate it from the focus area where you want the focus to be. Pretty simple. You tap and you can even lock it so it locks in on that focus, so you can snap a couple if you need to. Part of that sort of tap to focus is there's an exposure slider. Oldest trick in the book, this one. And I use it a lot in a lot of different scenarios because it has a lot of benefits in a lot of different ways. Depending on the lighting scenario that you're in, whether that be super bright conditions and you want to lessen the harshness of the sun, tap to focus on the sun area, drag the exposure slider down, and it will reduce the harshness of the sun. And it reduces the likelihood of it being overexposed. Even with HDR turned on, that can still happen. It's really great for indoor situations too, because you can, again, in situations like concerts where you've got lots of indoor lighting, and cameras at night don't like indoor lighting. Don't know what it is, especially smartphone cameras. So using this exposure slider, you can absolutely reduce the harshness of the light, drag it all the way to the end, and you get quite a stunning contrast. So the dark of the night sky and the darkness surrounding these sort of flashing lights looks quite beautiful and allows you to capture some moments in a lot better of a way. At concerts too, I found it worked really well when there were screens, because sometimes, again, when it's set to normal, it doesn't quite capture the screen properly because there's too much light. Drag the exposure slider down, you can capture that screen, and it gets you a sort of much better visual at the end. So many scenarios for that exposure slider. It's not just about sort of nighttime and sort of harsh lighting. You can change it to get different sort of styles of photo in different situations. Absolutely give it a go if you're finding that it's a little bit too overexposed or you want to change the area of exposure. This will do that. Other thing you might do when you're sort of traveling is portrait photos and food photos. So I'll kind of combine them together. The portrait mode on the S24 Ultra is great. Not only do you have an array of sort of options when it comes to zoom, you also can take advantage of the software. The grid lines being the main one, where you can position people in the grid and use the different lenses on the back to sort of change the perspective of the portrait. For example, my wife at ELNN in London, I really liked getting closer in and sort of capturing that sort of nice drama of the blurred background, but positioning her in the sort of the corner. I think it sort of created this nice photo and used the sort of flexibility of the cameras really nicely. Samsung also have a mode in here called food mode. And when you're taking photos of food, this can really benefit in sort of creating a bit more of an aesthetic for the food. Like this chocolate milkshake that I took a photo of, you have options. You can sort of pump up the contrast. You can change the white balance to make it more colorful, but you also can choose to sort of focus an area and just the food, and it kind of creates this depth of field all around it. So your eyes are drawn to the food. Really good. If you're wanting to highlight the food and make people hungry, I'd use it. Moving on to video, I think a lot of what I said in photos applies to video as well. Exposure slider, particularly in concerts, absolutely slays when it comes to recording the environment that you're in, because you're tapping on the area, reducing the exposure, and it's capturing this really sharp, also really bright and clean aesthetic. I really like it. Because in low light environments, smartphone cameras struggle with video. They don't do terribly, but they also don't capture it the best. So dragging that exposure slider down can help create it a little bit sharper video and reduce the grain and the noise as well. Some really good stabilization options. And when you are recording or traveling, especially if you have children, you're following them around a lot. So turning on the stabilization features inside the settings means that you're going to get smoother, more stable footage when you're sort of following people around. It's not just all about stabilization sort of as you're moving handheld. If you do want to create more like action style camera, turn on super steady. It gives you a bit more of an action style like GoPro, I guess, effect, if you will, where it sort of crops in heavily from the sensor and then allows you to get smooth, stable footage because it uses AI sort of correct the angle. It's really good. And in the right situation, you can get some really good results from it. And of course, it's the concert king. Doesn't matter where you go. If you are far in the bleachers at Taylor Swift in Lisbon, yeah, got to go. You can go so close to the stage from your seat and see everything that's going on, even up to 20 times zoom. Really impressed with it. It allowed me to capture the memories of the concert without needing to spend exorbitant amounts of being closer, because it was pretty much sold out when we got tickets. Anyway, look, there's some of my favorite tips in terms of getting the most out of just like the standard auto point and shoot functions on the S24 Ultra. I do have a full dedicated video to all the camera modes on this thing already, so I will direct you to that to go and check that out. Make sure you subscribe, come and follow me on my socials. I'll see you in the next one. You!